Hezbollah is an Iran-backed Lebanese Shia militia and US-designated foreign terrorist organization. Hezbollah is an Iranian partner force, helping Tehran project power across the region, train allied militias, and threaten US interests and allies across the region. Formed in the wake of the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, the group has conducted numerous attacks against Israeli and Western targets. Hezbollah, Shia Lebanese political party and militant group that first emerged during Lebanon's civil war as a militia after the Israeli invasion of that country in 1982. Since the 2000s it has been one of the foremost political forces in Lebanon, a multi-confessional country whose political system is largely divided along sectarian lines. Its close ties with Iran has made it one of the most important components of the Iran-led Axis of Resistance, a group of allied organizations in the Middle East that oppose the influence of Israel, the United States, and Saudi Arabia in the region. Considered to be the world's most heavily armed non-state militia in the 2020s, Hezbollah suffered a considerable blow in September 2024 with targeted attacks by Israel on its infrastructure, fighters, and leaders, including Hassan Nasrallah, who built the organization into what it is today. Shia Muslims, traditionally the weakest religious group in Lebanon, first found their voice in the moderate and largely secular Amal movement. Following the Islamic Revolution in Shia-majority Iran in 1979 and the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982, a group of Lebanese Shia clerics formed Hezbollah with the goal of driving Israel from Lebanon and establishing an Islamic republic there. Hezbollah was based in the predominantly Shia areas of the Bekaa Valley, southern Lebanon, and southern Beirut. It coordinated its efforts closely with Iran, from which it acquired substantial logistical support, and drew its manpower largely from disaffected younger, more radical members of Amal. Throughout the 1980s, Hezbollah engaged in increasingly sophisticated attacks against Israel and fought in Lebanon's civil war, repeatedly coming to blows with Amal. During that time, Hezbollah allegedly engaged in terrorist attacks including kidnappings and car bombings, directed predominantly against Westerners, but also established a comprehensive social services network for its supporters. The civil war ended in 1990 after the imposition of a consociational arrangement in which the country's several religious sects shared power. The agreement was to be enforced by Syrian forces, which had been drawn into the country's civil war in 1976. As the political environment changed, so did Hezbollah's ideology and rhetoric. In 2009, while continuing to call for resistance to Israel as well as support for Iran, its updated manifesto dropped calls for the establishment of an Islamic Republic in Lebanon and affirmed as its ideal government a democracy that represents national unity rather than sectarian interests. Meanwhile, Hezbollah was one of the few militia groups not disarmed by the Syrians at the end of the civil war, and, as Lebanon divided into factions that either supported or opposed Syrian involvement in the country, Hezbollah firmly favored Syria. In the fallout of the 2005 assassination of Rafik al-Hariri, a former prime minister who opposed Syrian involvement, a popular backlash against Syria led to its decision to withdraw its forces from Lebanon. On March 8, 2005, days after Syria announced its withdrawal, Hezbollah organized a massive rally in support of Syria. The date of this rally later served as the moniker for the pro-Syria bloc in Lebanese politics. Hezbollah also continued to fight a sustained guerrilla campaign against Israel in southern Lebanon until Israel's withdrawal in 2000. Years later, on July 12, 2006, Hezbollah, in an attempt to pressure Israel into releasing 3 Lebanese jailed in Israeli prisons, launched a military operation against Israel, killing a number of Israeli soldiers and abducting 2 as prisoners of war. This action led Israel to launch a major military offensive against Hezbollah. The 34-day war between Hezbollah and Israel resulted in the deaths of more than 1,000 Lebanese and the displacement of some 1 million. Fighting the Israel Defense Forces to a standstill, a feat no other Arab militia had accomplished, Hezbollah and its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, emerged as heroes throughout much of the Arab world. 2 years later, in July 2008, the bodies of the abducted soldiers were returned to Israel in exchange for 5 Lebanese prisoners and the bodies of about 200 others. In late 2016, a 29-month political stalemate was ended when Hezbollah ally Michel Aoun was elected president. As part of the deal bringing about his election, Saad al-Hariri was appointed prime minister. A year later, Hariri unexpectedly resigned while on a visit to Saudi Arabia, citing foreign involvement in Lebanon's affairs and insinuating that there was a plot against his life. Lebanon's army and intelligence agency both denied that any such plots had been uncovered, however, and it was believed that Hariri had resigned under pressure from the Saudi government. Many analysts believed Saudi Arabia was aiming to undermine Hezbollah's power. After weeks of international pressure on the Saudi government, Hariri was allowed to return to Lebanon, where he rescinded his resignation and continued as prime minister. On May 6, 2018, Lebanon held its first legislative election since 2009. The March 8 bloc received a majority of seats, making Hezbollah politically dominant for the first time. After 9 months of discussion, a unity government was announced that included most parties. Hezbollah did not receive direct control over any major cabinet posts, since its designation as a terrorist organization by some foreign governments would threaten international funding to Lebanon. But it did gain significant influence in the cabinet. The majority of the posts were filled by its March 8 allies. Hezbollah itself received 2 minor posts, and, perhaps most importantly, it was allowed to place a non-affiliated ally to head one of the largest ministries in the country, the Ministry of Health. The new cabinet struggled to address the crises facing Lebanon. However, frustration brewed over corruption in the government and over the government's inability to act effectively. In late 2019, massive demonstrations took place across the country, calling broadly for the country's top officials to resign. Although Hezbollah attempted to discourage protests and opposed any government resignation, many of its supporters participated in the protests, and Nasrallah said the government must work to regain the protesters' confidence. In May 2022, voters registered their frustration with the political establishment, including Hezbollah, in a legislative election. The March 8 bloc lost its majority in the National Assembly in favor of independent newcomers. The bloc remained predominant in the parliament nonetheless, and its parliament speaker was retained. But when Aoun's presidency came to an end in October, Hezbollah struggled to muster support for an ally, a grandson of former President Suleiman Frangi, to replace him. The office remained indefinitely vacant. In 2023, Hezbollah and the IDF faced confrontations over the Shebra Farms, a strip of land in the Golan Heights claimed by Lebanon, Israel, and Syria. Hezbollah stepped up its cross-border attacks after Hamas, an allied Palestinian militant group in the Gaza Strip, attacked southern Israel on October 7, and Israel launched the Israel-Hamas war in response. Hezbollah pledged to continue firing into Israel until the fighting in the Gaza Strip came to an end. In 2020, the IDF killed several Hezbollah commanders through targeted strikes in Lebanon as Israel's leadership continued to focus on its war with Hamas. But, as Israel shifted its attention increasingly toward its northern border in September, thousands of pagers and walkie-talkies belonging to members of Hezbollah exploded, killing dozens of people and injuring thousands of others. The attack was followed days later by an onslaught of Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon and Beirut that Israel said targeted Hezbollah weapons but killed hundreds of people, including civilians. On September 25, Hezbollah launched a missile toward central Israel for the first time, aiming for Tel Aviv, although it was intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome air defense system. On September 27, the Israeli Air Force dropped more than 80 bombs into the Dahi neighborhood just south of Beirut in a strike targeting Nasrallah. His body was found and identified the following day, and Hezbollah confirmed his death. On October 1, Israeli ground forces entered southern Lebanon. Within the first 24 hours, 8 Israeli soldiers were killed and more than 30 wounded in clashes with Hezbollah fighters. The devastation in Lebanon over the following 2 months exceeded that of the 2006 war and included wide destruction in southern Lebanon. A ceasefire agreement announced on November 26 was based largely around the provisions of United Nations Resolution 1701 that brought the 2006 war to an end. The withdrawal of Hezbollah north of the Litani River, a key provision of the 2006 resolution, had not previously been enforced and was among the primary tensions that led to the escalation in violence in 2023 and 2024.